It all started with a blip. I was stationed aboard the Proteus Deepwatcher, one of the outermost observation satellites orbiting Neptune. Most of my time was spent in silence, monitoring atmospheric fluctuations, logging dust particle densities, and running boring diagnostic checks. But then at 03:17 UTC on the 7th day of the cycle, something changed. A sharp high-frequency pulse hit our sensors, not a cosmic ray, not background radiation, a structured signal. At first I thought it was a glitch. Those aren't uncommon out here. I recalibrated, reset the relay, and ran a check. But the signal came again, louder, clearer. It wasn't random noise, it had rhythm, repetition, structure. I immediately called it in. Protocol demanded we report anything anomalous, but I knew this wasn't just anomalous. This was intelligent. Something down there on Neptune had just turned on, and it wanted to talk. As the signal grew stronger, something even stranger happened. The clouds around Neptune's south pole began to shift, like they were spiraling, into a vortex. And then, for the first time in recorded history, a colossal beam of violet light shot upward from the planet's surface, like a lighthouse from hell. My heart pounded in my chest. I wasn't ready for this. No one was. This wasn't just a beacon, it was a message, and I was the first one to hear it. I barely had time to react before the station's emergency protocols kicked in. Red lights flashed across the interface, automatic lockdown initiated, and the satellite's AI began rerouting power to the long-range transmission array. Back on Earth, they were now getting everything I saw. Every visual, every frequency, every tremor of data pouring in from Neptune. But here's the part that still keeps me awake at night. The beam of violet light. It wasn't just light. Using the onboard spectrograph, I broke down the emissions. What I found made my blood run cold. Embedded within the beam was a sequence, not binary, not Morse, not even anything human. It was fractal, recursive. The closer I zoomed in, the more data there was. Layers upon layers of geometric patterns that rewrote themselves in real time, like a living equation adapting to the observer. The AI flagged it as a self-generating translinguistic structure. Whatever was sending the signal knew how to communicate with intelligence, any intelligence. It was adjusting to us. I recorded hours of data and beamed it back to mission control, but deep down, I already knew they wouldn't be able to decode it. Not fast enough. This was beyond anything we'd ever seen, beyond any SETI anomaly or fast radio burst. This was deliberate. Then, without warning, the station's lights flickered. For a moment, the low hum of power systems dropped to silence. My instruments rebooted, except one, the beacon tracking monitor. It remained on, glowing, reacting. That's when something happened outside. I turned to the viewing port, and I swear to you, I saw the clouds of Neptune move in a way that defied physics. Not just rotating, but folding, like the very fabric of space was warping. A shape began to emerge from within the vortex, not a ship, not a creature. Their structure, monolithic, dark, hidden for who knows how long beneath the gas giant's crushing atmosphere. And here's the thing, when the structure fully emerged, the signal changed. The fractal code resolved into something I could finally interpret. A single terrifying word, return. But who was supposed to return us? Them? Or something worse that was buried on Neptune, waiting to be awakened? It didn't make sense, none of it did. Neptune was supposed to be just a gas giant. No solid surface, no platforms, no ruins, and definitely no alien monolith sending out recursive, intelligent signals across the void. But there it was, rising through the churning atmosphere, blacker than space itself, absorbing the surrounding light like a gravitational sink. From my vantage point, the structure looked ancient. Not broken, no, preserved, as if it had been buried deliberately, hidden in the crushing depths beyond the reach of human curiosity. Until now. As the storm surrounding it intensified, a strange calm fell over my station. The instruments that had been buzzing with activity began to go silent, one by one. The AI shut down. My external communications went dark. The only thing still functioning was the beacon interface, and the new word pulsing on its screen in slow, rhythmic intervals. Return, return, return. I stared at it for what felt like an hour, hypnotized, trying to make sense of the message. My thoughts raced through every possibility. What if we weren't the intended recipients? What if this beacon wasn't reaching out to us, but warning us about something trying to come back? Then something even more disturbing occurred. The beacon began sending new data, coordinates, not just random numbers, star maps, systems I'd never seen before, but one caught my attention: Sol, our own system, and Earth. Earth was marked, highlighted. It wasn't a distress call, it was a homing beacon, and Earth was the destination. Before I could process it further, the station's internal gravity shifted, just slightly, but enough for me to feel it. I reached for the stabilizer bar. That's when I noticed the light outside. Not violet this time. Red, a soft, pulsing red glow began to radiate from the monolith, spreading like veins through the clouds of Neptune. It pulsed in sync with the signal now flooding the console. Not words this time, images, flashes of a civilization, impossibly tall structures bathed in alien suns. Creatures with forms I could barely comprehend. Not machines, not biological either, something in between. And always in the center of it all, that same structure, the beacon, standing as a silent god among storms. But then, the images changed. Flames, collapse, a great migration, not of ships, but of minds. Consciousness fleeing across the stars, searching, waiting. For what? For a body? For a world? No, worse. For a way back. I sat there, shaking, feeling as though the monolith was looking through me now. Like I was no longer an observer, but part of the process, and somewhere deep in my mind a thought whispered, not my own. We never left. What did that mean? Who were we? Were they inside us already? I don't know. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a signal, it was an invitation, and we had already accepted it. I didn't sleep, not that night, not the next, not really ever again, not in the way you think of sleep. Because once your mind is touched by something like that, there's no going back to dreams. There's only remembering and seeing. I kept replaying the images in my head, the cities that were never on Earth, the entities that shimmered between matter and memory, and always that word, return. The monolith hadn't just broadcast a signal, it had opened a door in my mind. As I paced the narrow corridor of the satellite, systems offline and emergency lighting casting long shadows across the walls, I became aware of a pressure building outside the hull. Not physical pressure, but presence, like I was no longer alone. Something was watching the station, studying it, not from the outside, from within time itself. I activated a manual diagnostic, an old piece of code from before the AI update. The screen flickered, then lines of strange, unreadable characters scrolled across my terminal. Not machine error, not language, a code, again. But this time something primal stirred inside me. I understood it, not with my mind, with something older, buried deep inside our species. That's when I found the restricted file logs, tucked away. In the station's black box was a hidden file, dated 1979, years before this satellite was even operational. The name of the file chilled me. Beacon Report, Neptune Anomaly. I opened it. The video began with grainy footage, NASA's logo in the corner, a blurred astronaut helmet reflecting the surface of something. Not Earth, not any known terrain. The narrator spoke in hushed tones. Operation Echo initiated. In response to radiothermal anomalies detected beneath Neptune's southern pole, probe Alethea 9 made contact with unidentified structure. Data corrupted upon transmission. Presumed classified. Beacon active. Recommending protocol. Stasis, what the hell was that? Then the feed cut out. Another file loaded. This time a document, heavily redacted, but enough remained to terrify me. They existed before Earth's formation, biosynthetic, trans-dimensional, witnessed across pre-human artifacts, symbols consistent with those, are recovered beneath Antarctic ice core samples. They don't travel between stars, they wake up inside them. I couldn't breathe. We thought we were explorers, pioneers of the cosmos, but we were just latecomers to a party that ended long before we were born. They were here before us, before Earth, before even the sun was what it is now. The monolith wasn't transmitting outward. It was calling inward, down through time, down through memory, to whatever piece of them still lingered, perhaps in the minds of those who heard the signal, perhaps in me. Suddenly, the red light outside shifted again, growing brighter. The beacon had changed its pulse. It wasn't just repeating return anymore. Now it had added another word, awaken. That's when I heard footsteps. Not over the radio, inside the station. Someone, or something, had come aboard. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked up as the sound of those slow, deliberate footsteps echoed down the main corridor of the satellite. Metallic, measured, inhuman. I was alone. So I was supposed to be alone. The emergency lights cast a faint orange glow across the interior, and the shadows seemed to bend, stretching unnaturally, like they were being pulled towards something or someone. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath fogging in the air. My first instinct was to grab the emergency taser bolted to the wall near the airlock. I took one step toward it and stopped, because I saw it, not through the viewing port, not on any of my monitors, but reflected faintly in the polished steel of the cryo-sleeper chamber door. It was tall, impossibly tall for this cramped station. Its body was smooth, too smooth, like it had been carved from obsidian but shifted subtly with the light. Its face, or what should have been a face, was a mirrored void, and in that void I saw glimpses of stars I didn't recognize, moons I've never seen, and flashes of my own memories. It wasn't just here physically. It was here cognitively. This thing, it was inside me. I turned slowly. The corridor was empty, but the reflection remained. It was no longer behind me, but inside the reflection itself, as if the station had become a canvas, and this passenger was painting itself onto it. That's what I started calling it, the passenger, because it hadn't forced its way in. I had invited it the moment I engaged with the signal. The whispers began then, not out loud. Not in any language, just thoughts that weren't mine blooming like invasive flowers in the back of my mind. I understood things I shouldn't. About time, about memory, about existence. The beacon wasn't a transmitter. It was a key, and I had turned it. The passenger began showing me more images, sensations. Earth not as it is now, but covered in colossal, spire-like constructs, stretching into the sky like antennae, oceans black as oil, the moon cracked open like an egg, and at the heart of it all, the return, not of them, of us. Because somewhere along the evolutionary line, something had been placed inside us, not metaphorically, literally, a dormant signal, a code coiled in our DNA like a sleeping serpent, and the activation of the beacon. It was the trigger, all. Across the solar system, others were waking up, not just satellites, not just monoliths, people. I staggered back into the command module. The main console flickered to life, though I hadn't touched it. The passenger was interfacing with it, guiding it. My fingers moved across the display as if on their own, drawn by instinct rather than thought. A new folder appeared. Phase 1, Preparation. Inside it, a list of coordinates, Earth-based, deep underground facilities. Names I recognized from whispered conspiracy theories. Tharsis Vault, the Mariana Sink, Black Root Chamber. All marked as active. The beacon on some Indian dust. Neptune had only been the beginning, and somehow I had become its prophet, or maybe its vessel. I looked up again at the reflection. The passenger didn't move, because it didn't need to. It was already inside and it was waiting. I don't remember passing out. One moment I was staring into the console, watching as those forbidden coordinates etched themselves into the screen, like scars. The next I woke up on the floor of the station's engineering bay, cold, shivering and drenched in sweat. But something was different. My thoughts weren't linear anymore. Time didn't feel like a straight line. It felt like a spiral, with every memory, every emotion, every moment folding in on itself. I could remember things that hadn't happened yet. I could feel experiences that weren't mine. The passenger hadn't just entered the station. It had breached my mind. I crawled toward the manual interface embedded in the wall, an old analog failsafe system meant to reboot the station's AI in case of cascade failure. I needed help. I needed control. I needed to be alone in my head. Again, but when I accessed the logs, I found a file I hadn't seen before. MFP01, Mind Fracture Protocol. Timestamp, 8 hours ago, executed by me. I watched the footage in horror. The security camera showed me in the command module, completely lucid, calmly entering commands that erased critical memory sectors in the AI and triggered a localized cognitive echo filter. I spoke aloud as I did it. If you're watching this, it means you've already been breached. The signal is inside, you can't stop it, but maybe you can understand it. Then I looked straight into the camera and I said, they're not invading, they're restoring. We were theirs. We always were. I dropped the console and vomited in the corner of the bay. My own voice, but not my thoughts, not my beliefs. It was like watching someone else wear my skin. I should have activated the escape pod. I should have cut the comms and launched myself into deep space beyond signal range, but it was too late for that. The signal wasn't out there anymore, it was me. And then, for the first time in hours, the station's proximity alert lit up. Inbound object detected. I rushed to the main viewport. There, drifting through the atmosphere of Neptune just above the monolith, was a second structure. Smaller, sleek, not ancient, but recently deployed. A human vessel. Earth had sent a response team. I tried to make contact. The comms flickered, whined, then connected. The transmission came through, video only. 5 crew members, suited up, faces hidden behind reflective visors. But there was something off. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They just stared at the camera. And behind them, inside their ship, I could see it, another passenger, not hiding, not manipulating, just standing there, watching me. Then the lead figure raised their hand and showed me something that should not exist. A fragment of the beacon inside their ship. They had brought it with them. The call cut. My station lights dimmed again, but not from power loss, from submission. The beacon wasn't sending anymore. It had already transmitted all it needed. Now, it was listening. And the passenger inside me, it smiled, without a face. After the transmission cut out, I just sat there, breathing shallowly, heart pounding like a war drum inside my chest. I wasn't sure what scared me more, the silent crew, the fragment of the beacon, or the fact that the passenger inside me hadn't reacted it. Hullet was calm, content, almost awaiting. Hours passed, maybe days. I can't tell anymore. Time has started breaking down in this part of space, especially near Neptune. The signal has a gravity of its own. It pulls at your sense of reality, bends your memories, colors everything, with meaning that didn't exist before. Then I received another ping, not from the Earth ship, not from Neptune, but from Triton, Neptune's largest moon. At first, it was just static, then a rhythmic clicking, then low tonal pulses. Exactly like the ones the beacon had sent when it first activated. I aligned the station's long-range scanner toward the source, filtering the noise through the pattern recognition algorithm. The message was short. Second temple, underneath, help us. I didn't know who us was, but the passenger reacted. For the first time since it entered me, I felt genuine tension radiating through my nervous system, like it had been caught off guard. The screen shifted again, this time revealing archived logs from an ancient classified deep drill mission to Triton Operation Thalea, supposedly cancelled due to extreme seismic instability, but these logs said otherwise. Recovered structure beneath southern polar ice. Dimensions unknown. Constructed from unknown alloy. Emit subneural vibrations. Beacon fragment present. Threat level undetermined. Psychological destabilization recorded in all personnel. 2 operatives attempted self-removal of eyes. 1 spoke in an unknown language for 36 continuous hours. Only 1 survivor extracted. Subject placed in indefinite cryostasis. Attached was a final note. Subject continually whispers the same phrase. It's not dead, just dreaming. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Another beacon, another monolith, and this time someone or something had tried to stop it from being found. The passenger pulsed in my head again, not violently, not like pain, more like pressure. Urgency. I had to go. I rerouted all station power to the external shuttle. It was old, barely operational, but it had just enough fuel for a low orbit burn toward Triton. As I prepared for launch, I caught one last glance of Neptune through the viewport. The key beam of violet light had dimmed. The atmosphere was swirling calmly now. The beacon had gone silent. Not because it was done, because it was waiting for the others. The shuttle detached with a slow hiss. I watched the station disappear behind me as I locked course to Triton. That's when the cold hit me. Not the cold of space, but something deeper, existential, ancient. I knew in some impossible way that I was heading toward a place where time was thin, where reality frayed, and where those who listened too closely to the signal never came back the same. Halfway through the flight, I began to hear something in the static again. Voices, but they weren't human. They were layered, endless, like an ocean of minds speaking at once, all trying to fit through the same channel. I couldn't understand them, except for one voice, clear, female, and very, very human. It whispered, "You're already there." The cockpit lights flickered. The stars outside shifted, and I realized I had never left. The shuttle touched down on Triton with a grinding shriek of metal and ice. The descent wasn't smooth. Nothing felt natural here. The moon's surface, though known to be frozen and mostly inert, radiated a subtle hum, like something buried beneath was breathing. I stepped out into the stormless silence. Triton's sky was a pale, lifeless gray, yet the light it cast made everything shimmer slightly out of sync, like reality was trying to remember how it was supposed to look. My boots crunched into the frozen surface, but there was no echo, no wind, no sign of life, except for the shape rising in the distance. The temple. It wasn't a building in the traditional sense. It wasn't made for humans. It was a massive, sunken spiral carved into the ice, stretching downward in perfect geometric descent. No seams, no signs of erosion, no indication of tools or construction. Just a black material that drank the light and gave nothing back. And at the heart of it, below layers of frozen time, pulsed a faint red glow, identical to the light emitted by the beacon on Neptune. As I descended into the spiral, I felt a pressure, building not on my body but inside my thoughts. The deeper I went, the more fragmented my memories became. I couldn't remember my own last name. I couldn't remember what my voice sounded like, but I could remember cities that don't exist, skies with 3 suns, the scent of burning metal and flowers that grew in the vacuum of space. The passenger was becoming stronger here, not louder, just more present, like I was no longer the pilot of my own body, but a guest invited along for the ride. Then I reached it. The chamber. At the very bottom of the spiral, the path opened into a perfect circular room lined with pulsating ridges of alien alloy, like veins surrounding a heart. In the center was a pillar, tall, thin, crystalline, and floating within it. Another fragment, smaller than the one the Earth crew had shown me, but unmistakably part of the same technology. A piece of the beacon, and it was active. Not just pulsing with light, but with awareness. The moment I stepped into the chamber, it reacted. The walls lit up in sequence. The air, what little there was, vibrated like a living instrument being tuned. Then, from within the pillar, I heard it again. That voice, the same woman. "You were the last sleeper. The final gate. It has begun." I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by something ancient flooding my thoughts. Visions poured into me like tidal waves, a race older than time, once scattered across galaxies after the collapse of their home dimension. They couldn't die. They couldn't be destroyed. So they implanted themselves into matter, planets, moons, stars, into minds, into us. We were never alone. We were never ourselves. We were grown like soil grows roots, incubating the last flickers of a species that refused to vanish. And now that the beacon had activated, the harvest had begun. The passenger inside me began to unravel. It wasn't singular. It was a vessel for many, a colony. A God memory trying to reform itself using the living. But just before I lost all sense of who I was, I heard something else. Something new, another voice, male, human, weak. Please, help me. I turned. Slumped against the far wall of the chamber was a cryopod, old, cracked, covered in frost. Inside was a man, barely alive, his eyes fluttering open for the first time in decades. He was wearing a NASA patch from 1979, and on his chest was branded a word burned into the skin by something not human. Host. I realized then, I wasn't the first. I might not even be the last, but I was the only one still resisting. For now. I wiped the frost from the cryopod's viewport, heart pounding in my chest. The man's eyes twitched beneath pale, sunken lids. His lips moved slowly as if he were trying to speak, trying to push words through a throat that hadn't been used in decades. Then his eyes snapped open, pure white, no irises, no pupils, just endless void. But behind those blank orbs I saw awareness. Not animal panic, not confusion, something ancient. Watching me. Still the man spoke. His voice was weak, trembling, but unmistakably human. You made it too far. His fingers twitched, nails cracked and blackened from cold and time. He raised a hand slowly toward the interior of the chamber. That's when I noticed. His veins were glowing faintly. Not red or blue, but that same deep violet as the original beacon on Neptune. We were the first, he rasped. They didn't tell anyone. None of them knew. Not NASA. Not the world. They buried it here. We found it. Under the ice, the beacon, it was sleeping. And then his body jerked violently as if a circuit inside him had overloaded. A scream erupted from his mouth. Not vocal, but psychic, slamming into my thoughts like a hurricane. I staggered back, falling to the cold floor of the temple chamber, clutching my head. Images exploded in my mind. A rocket landing in secret on Triton in 1979. Engineers discovering a perfect spiral buried beneath 40 kilometers of ice. Scientists losing their minds, scratching equations into the walls in their own blood. And one man. Volunteering to connect with the fragment, the man in the cryopod, the first host. He hadn't survived. Not really. What remained was a shell, a breathing transmitter, relaying data, not just through space, but across dimensions, because the passengers, they weren't just from another star, they were from another layer of reality. The man let out a final breath and then his body froze completely. Still, empty, not dead, just released. And then the chamber shifted. The walls trembled as if they had been waiting for that moment. The pillar in the center of the room flared with white-hot intensity, and in the space above it, a holographic map of the solar system appeared. Perfect, glowing, rotating, but it was changing. Fast Earth pulsed red. Mars blinked once, then went dark. Saturn lit up like a warning light, and Neptune split open. Not literally, symbolically. The map fractured, peeling away the planet's image to reveal something hidden inside. A core, metallic, alive, a gate. That's when I understood. Triton was the key, but Neptune was the lock, and we'd already turned it. I staggered backward, breath hitching in my throat. Behind me, the first host's body began to crack, slowly, eerily, like porcelain under pressure. His face was still peaceful, but his skin peeled away to reveal nothing inside. No flesh, no bone, just a pulsing geometric pattern, fractal, recursive. The same language as the beacon. The passenger inside me surged. It knew. Phase 2 had begun. Suddenly the map changed again, zooming far, far out, beyond the solar system, beyond the galaxy, until it stopped at a void, a swirling nothingness. And in the center, a message burned across the display in language I somehow recognized. They are coming through. I turned to run. The chamber was collapsing, not physically, dimensionally. The walls folded inward like reflections imploding, shattering time and space. My body didn't feel pain, but my mind did. I could feel myself being pulled apart and reassembled with each step. I reached the spiral, climbed, scrambled, screamed. The passenger whispered, "You can't leave." "You are the message now," but I didn't stop. I refused, because I had seen what came next. I had seen what would awaken on Earth, and if I didn't warn them, there'd be no Earth left to awaken. By the time I reached the top of the spiral, the surface of Triton had changed. The once quiet plains of ice were now cracked, veins of violet light spreading outward from the temple entrance like an infection. The sky, once pale and dead, had deepened into a swirling dome of darkness. Stars no longer twinkled above, and a dull, circular void now hovered where Neptune should have been. It wasn't just visual. The space around me was wrong. Distances. Warped. Sound bled into vision. I could hear colors and taste memory. The passenger was no longer a whisper. It had become a chorus, and its voice now echoed from the planet itself. I stumbled toward the shuttle, but my legs felt like they weren't mine. With every step, I had to fight the overwhelming sensation that I was walking through a dream someone else was having. A dream where I was just an actor reading lines written by something older than language. The moment I reached the hatch, it opened automatically. That was the first sign something was wrong. I never programmed auto-access. The shuttle had no AI, but it knew I was coming. I climbed inside. Systems were already active. Flight path set. Automatically rerouted to Neptune. I should have changed course, should have tried to override, but my hands moved on their own. The passenger wasn't steering. The ship was the passenger now. I realized the vessel from Earth, the one carrying the crew with empty eyes. It had never left Neptune. It had only copied itself, like a virus, like code. And this shuttle was just another replication, a delivery system, and I was the payload. The engines ignited. As we lifted off from Triton, I looked out at the temple spiral one last time and saw something climbing out. It wasn't human. Not anymore. A shape, vast and shifting, like tendrils of thought given form. It pulsed with the same red light as the core of the monoliths. Its body was partially submerged in the ice, but its head, if you could call it that, turned to look at me as I left, and in my mind I heard its name, the Gatekeeper. It had been waiting there for eons, trapped, starving. The activation of the Neptune beacon hadn't just been a signal. It had been a prison door swinging open. The Gatekeeper had been sealed beneath Triton to stop it from reaching what lay beyond. Neptune, the true gate, and now it was free. My shuttle hurtled toward the gas giant as reality flickered around me. I saw flashes of Earth, oceans boiling, cities screaming in silence, people clutching their heads as the signal reached them. It was happening already. The broadcast had gone global, every mind connected to a screen, a satellite, even a whisper of radios was infected. The gate was opening. As we entered Neptune's upper atmosphere, the clouds parted not with turbulence but with reverence. They peeled away in perfect spirals, revealing the impossible. A colossal structure larger than any moon hidden within the planet's core. It wasn't just orbiting Neptune, it was inside it. It had been all along. A black ring of impossible. Geometry turning slowly, almost lovingly, as if waking from a long sleep. And at its center, hovering like the eye of a god, was a sphere, not made of matter, made of consciousness. My shuttle approached it like a pilgrim reaching the altar. Tried to resist, screamed, clawed at the controls, but my body no longer obeyed. I wasn't flying toward the gate. I was being received. The passenger inside me was ready. It had waited centuries to return to this place, and now it had its vessel, its offering. Me. But just before we crossed, the final veil, just before the shuttle entered the eye of the sphere, something shifted. A memory, my name, my mother's voice, the feel of rain, the taste of coffee, humanity. The passenger reeled. For a split second it faltered, and in that moment, I acted. I triggered the emergency ejection protocol. The system resisted. The shuttle screamed. The pressure warped my bones, but I didn't care. I refused to be the one who opened the gate. I shot backward into the upper atmosphere, tumbling through Neptune's clouds, watching as the shuttle continued, slowly, swallowed by the structure. Then as I fell, I saw the impossible. The gate reacted, it flared, twisted, and began to bleed light. A crack had formed, and from within, something else was beginning to reach out. Not the passengers, not the gatekeeper. Something worse, something even they had tried to keep sealed away. I wasn't the key, I was the warning, and I was falling, with no one left to hear me scream. I was falling. Not through air, not through space, through layers of existence. My body, if it still belonged to me, was tumbling through the atmosphere of Neptune like a loose thread pulled from the fabric of reality. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't think without the passenger whispering behind every thought. But something had gone wrong for them. I felt it, my act of resistance, the override, the ejection. It had broken their rhythm, disturbed the ritual. The gate hadn't opened cleanly. It had fractured. And from the depths of that wound, something was stirring, something even the passengers feared. I blacked out before impact. Or maybe I never hit anything, because when I woke, I wasn't on Neptune anymore. Not physically, but I was still inside it. Inside whatever space existed between atoms here, I stood in a place that shouldn't exist, an endless plane of black glass reflecting not light, but time. I could see versions of myself in the surface, me as a child, me in the shuttle, me older, terrified, me with no face at all. And then I heard it, not the whisper of the passenger, not the thought songs of the gatekeeper, but a new voice, a scream, eternal and wrong, vibrating from beneath the glass, from beneath Neptune itself, the thing that should not awaken. I don't know what to call it. I don't have the words. No one does. The closest I can come is this. It was the death of boundaries. A presence so ancient, so endless, that it defied even the laws the passengers worshipped. It didn't move, it didn't speak. It existed, and that alone was enough to bend time around it like wet paper. I was shown everything. I saw the first beacon activate, not ours, not even from this galaxy, but from a time before time, in a universe adjacent to ours, collapsed and buried under the weight of what they tried to summon. I saw civilizations like ours, more advanced than ours, reaching for answers and being answered. I saw their bones used as wires, their memories hollowed out to store data that we do not deserve to understand, and I saw what became of their worlds, silent, dead, preserved like warnings we refused to read. The passengers, they weren't masters of this force. They were its servants, gatekeepers, curators, meat-wrapped keys scattered across the stars, and now they had broken their own seal. The gate above Neptune had been built not to open, but to contain, a plug in the fabric of this universe, and my body, my soul had been part of that plug, a living component, bred over millennia, guided by dreams, bloodlines, mutations. I was never me. I was it, waiting to reach this moment. But something unexpected had happened. Emotion, memory, humanity. My resistance, the desperate need to protect, to survive, to matter, had altered the frequency, tainted the signal. The gate had cracked, but not the way they intended. And now the thing below was waking up, angrily. As I stood in that black glass dimension, the reflections around me began to scream. My past selves, my futures, all versions of me that could have been. They were being burned away one by one. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, heart racing with terror, until I heard a new voice, a familiar one. It was the woman, the one from the signal. Soft, human, somehow still there. You've bought time, that's all, run. Suddenly I was back, slammed into my own body like a meteor. The cold hit me first, then pain. Then the weight of Neptune's lower atmosphere pressing against my suit. I was alive, crashed, injured, broken, but alive. I looked up and saw the gate, still spinning above, now bleeding matter into space like a wounded god. A tear had formed, wound in the skin of reality, and something was reaching out. I could see it just beyond the edge of visibility. Not physical, not even conceptual. But it was looking at me, watching, waiting. The passengers had vanished, retreating, hiding, whatever. They had tried to bring through. It had turned on them too. And now I was the last human presence near the breach. I opened the emergency beacon on my suit and began transmitting on every known frequency, over and over. Do not respond to Neptune. Do not send help. Do not open. The gate, I am still alive, and but so is it. Then beneath my breath I said something I hadn't said since I was a child. A prayer, because if Earth answered the call, this time there wouldn't be anyone left to warn them. I didn't know how long I lay there, half buried in Neptune's atmosphere, wrapped in the shattered remains of my EVA suit, breathing through emergency filters and watching the gate bleed into the void. Time had become a suggestion, not a rule. It stretched and looped, compressing and expanding like lungs too old to remember how to inhale. And in all that warped silence, something gnawed at the edge of my mind. Why me? Why had the passengers chosen me to carry their message? Why had the gate recognized me as a key? Why had the thing that should not awaken looked through me? The answer came not as words, but as absence, a silence deeper than any vacuum, because I had already heard the signal once before, long ago. Not on Neptune. Not in space on Earth. I was 8 years old, lying in bed, recovering from a seizure the doctors couldn't explain. I remembered the hospital lights, the rhythmic beep of machines. But mostly I remembered a dream, a voice whispering, "You will be there, you will remember." And I had. That's what none of them understood. Not NASA, not the deep black agencies, not even the earthbound shadow factions who once tried to bury the first beacon on Triton. The signal doesn't start when the machine activates, it starts when you're born. Back then I thought I had been chosen. Now I understood the truth. I was designed. My genetics, my neural architecture, my entire timeline, all tailored to bring me here, to be a perfect frequency for their message to ride on. I wasn't a host, I was a bridge, but something went wrong. Emotion, grief, the will to resist. I remembered my mother's face, my brother's stupid laugh, the way the air smelled on Earth after rain, those tiny human things, fragments of soul. They didn't fit the passenger's equation, and so the message distorted, the gate cracked, and now the universe was listening. That's when I picked up a signal on the emergency comms, not from Earth, not from the Black Ops vessels. It was faint, weak, but real. A whisper through the static. Proteus command to any live asset. Copy unknown event. Neptune site has gone dark. Anomalous gravitational signatures detected. Do not engage. Then silence. Then another signal. Different origin. Not Earth. No words. Just a vibration. Like a heartbeat, thudding through. The fabric of space. One pulse. Pause. Then another. And then I understood. It wasn't a distress beacon. It was a countdown. The gate hadn't opened completely yet. Whatever force the passengers had tried to awaken, it needed more. More signals. More vessels, more hosts. It was waiting for Earth to respond, to send rescue, to send analysis teams, to send people. I scrambled to my feet, lungs burning, bones screaming. I had to do something, anything. I couldn't stop the gate, but maybe I could warn the others. I began climbing back toward the surface of the ridge I'd landed on, dragging the emergency transmitter like a lifeline. Every few steps, I felt Neptune change. The planet pulsed beneath me like a dying animal. The air shimmered with invisible heat. The clouds twisted into unnatural geometries, hexagons, spirals, shapes with too many sides to exist. And still, the countdown continued. Each pulse louder, faster. Behind me, the gate began to twist, not physically, but conceptually. Its geometry no longer obeyed 3 dimensions. It became a paradox, a shape that should collapse in on itself, yet didn't. I could feel my mind bleeding, trying to process it. Then I reached the summit, and what I saw that turned my blood cold. Ships. 3 of them, Earth-made, approaching from high. Orbit. Their engines lit like torches, unaware of what they were diving into. They were responding to my beacon. Too late. I screamed into the comms, shouted, cried, begged, "Turn back. It's not a rescue site, it's a trap." But there was no reply, just static. And one final beat of the countdown. Then, the gate opened, not all at once, not like a door, like a scream, echoing across every layer of reality. The sky tore. The clouds peeled apart like skin, and from that impossible wound in space, it began to emerge. Not a being, not a god. Something older than either concept, something born before thought, before time. And it saw me. Not because I was special, but because I had delayed it. I had interfered. And now, it knew my name. It came through. The gate like a shadow falling in reverse. First not there, then suddenly always there. It didn't arrive as something new, but as something that had always been here, hiding behind reality like a parasite beneath skin. It had no shape that I could comprehend, only impressions. Say a crown made of orbiting planets, wings of frozen time, limbs that branched into possibilities, and a face. No, it didn't have a face. It had a void, an emptiness that drank light and thought. But somehow I knew it was looking at me. It had no eyes. It didn't need them. I was the last spark in its path, and I had delayed its birth. The Earthships began to shudder in orbit. I watched helplessly from the ridge as the first one's engines faltered. Then its outer hull began to melt, not from heat but from incompatibility. The ship's very atoms rejected the presence of the thing now unfurling across Neptune's orbit. The second vessel tried to turn, too late. Its trajectory bent, not by force, but by intention. The laws of motion no longer applied. They were not ships anymore, they were offerings. The gate pulsed again, this time not with light but with memory, and I felt it. Every person on those vessels, their lives, their regrets, their final thoughts. They were devoured before they even understood what they had awakened. And then the creature spoke, not in words, not even in sound. It spoke in truths, and they tore through me like jagged glass. You are the echo of an echo, a simulation of will, a node created to collapse. I fell to my knees. My mind was bleeding, not physically but conceptually. Who I was, who I had been, was unraveling. Every belief I ever held about life, the universe, morality, was exposed as nothing. But cargo in a cosmic transmission. The creature didn't want Earth, not like the passengers did. It didn't invade, it corrected. It was here to clean up the noise. The universe wasn't broken, we were a glitch, a mutation of sentience that had infected the dark. The passengers, in their desperation to survive, had hidden within us. And that act alone had attracted something worse. This was not punishment, it was maintenance. The thing with no eyes reached toward Neptune's core, and the planet responded. It groaned, alive. I could feel the structure beneath my feet liquefying. The monoliths were sinking, dissolving into the creature's body like ink in water. Then, Earth replied. A signal, a global one, every satellite, every probe. Every telescope pointed in this direction, broadcasting curiosity, concern, empathy, and that was the final mistake, because the creature didn't kill. It absorbed. It took the meaning of things, the weight of thought. It fed on understanding. And now the collective mind of Earth had become visible. I watched in horror as a wave of invisible distortion flowed from the creature, sweeping across the solar system like a data pulse. Mars, the asteroid belt, Jupiter, all flickered, changed. Forgotten. They still existed, but not the way we remembered them. History was being rewritten in real time, and yet I remained, somehow bleeding, broken, but untouched. That's when I realized what the passenger had done. They hadn't used me as a key. They had used me as a barrier. I was contaminated, not with their signal, but with ours. Human emotion, love, Grief, hope, resistance. The irrational things, the unpredictable noise. I wasn't pure enough to be consumed. I was offensive to the creature, and that gave me the only advantage I had left. I crawled back toward the transmitter on the ridge. My hands were raw, my visor cracked, my lungs filling with acidic vapor. But I moved like a machine powered by one last idea. If my signal could disrupt the gate, maybe Earth's could too, but it had to be the right kind of signal. Not information, a scream. I reprogrammed the emergency beacon. One final message. A burst of raw human fear. A chaotic stream of sound and memory. Music, laughter, pain, crying, silence, a baby's first breath, a soldier's last whisper, a mother's heartbeat, all compressed into one incomprehensible blast, and I launched it into the gate, into the creature. For one blinding second, everything stopped. The creature recoiled, not from power, from confusion. And in that confusion, Neptune screamed. Wave of pressure exploded outward. The gate fractured. The black glass sky above split down the middle. The creature twisted backward as if remembering something it shouldn't. And then it began to fold in on itself. Not dying, just retreating. Back through the hole it had. Torn back beyond time, back into the void between universes. And I just lay there alone, still alive, but something told me this wasn't over. It had seen Earth, and now it knew how to find us. Neptune was quiet now. Not peaceful, not safe, just quiet. Like the aftermath of a massacre no one witnessed, but everyone would feel. The clouds, once violently spiraling around. The gate, now floated aimlessly, confused. The light had changed, subtly wrong, like it was filtering through memories instead of atmosphere. The monoliths had vanished. The gate, fractured and bleeding energy, was closing in slow, shuddering pulses, but the worst part, it wasn't sealed. It was just tired. The thing with no eyes hadn't been destroyed, just disrupted. Confused by something it couldn't digest. My signal hadn't hurt it. It had simply agitated it, like a sound that didn't belong in its eye. Perfect system of silence. And now it was retreating but not forgetting. I sat there, broken, mouth dry, suit leaking oxygen at a rate that should have killed me hours ago. But time was loose here. Gravity bent around ideas instead of mass. My body hurt in ways that had nothing to do with flesh. I was being held together by sheer defiance. By the last shreds of human stubbornness that even the ancient gods of the Air Void couldn't calculate. Then the voice returned, soft, distant, female, the one from the beacon. The one I thought I'd imagined. You weren't supposed to fight back, you were just supposed to carry the signal. But now, you're something else. She wasn't in my head this time. She was speaking from outside, from a place I couldn't see but could feel, like she was watching from between the frames of reality. It's awake now, you've marked your world. They can hear you. I croaked out a whisper, unsure if it was with my mouth or just my mind. Who are you? A pause. The last one who tried to warn you. She showed me flashes of another being, once human, now something else, spread thin across dimensions. Trapped, not dead, not alive. A recording of resistance. She had failed into whatever was listening beyond it. But I hadn't. Not yet. I asked her the only thing that mattered. Can we stop it? Her answer wasn't hopeful. It was true. No. But you can slow it down. You can make Earth too loud for it to feed on, too chaotic, too alive. It's not used. To noise, to irrationality. That's your weapon. Emotion, illogic, dreams, regret, hope. All the things the universe considers flaws. To them, we're broken code. To us, we're alive. Suddenly, a new alert flashed on my wrist console. Barely functional, but still clinging to life. Incoming transmission. Source: Earth Deep Array SETI Archive. Loopback encryption, non-standard, primitive message. Body audio file. I played it, static at first, then laughter. Children playing, music, church bells, a soccer game, someone shouting in Portuguese, a dog barking, a train horn, rain, wind, life. They had received the signal. They'd seen what I sent and they'd answered. They weren't sending help. They were sending noise across every channel, every frequency. Earth was howling back at the void, not with science or logic or threats, but with chaos. Billions of people screaming, crying, celebrating, living. And for the first time I saw something change in the gate's fractured eye. It hesitated, like it was realizing this world might not be worth it. I don't know how long that hesitation will last. A day, a decade, a generation. But I know this. We bought time. That's all we ever have. But now we know what's on the other side, and we know how to fight it. Not with weapons. Not with math, with the only thing we have that it doesn't understand, soul. I collapsed again, my body giving in. The atmosphere thinned, my vision blurred. My thoughts dissolved into a drifting fog of sound and memory. And just before it all went black, I heard a final whisper in my ear, not from the woman, not from the passenger, not from the creature, but from Earth. We're still here. Yes, we are. And we're not going quiet. I woke up to the sound of my own heartbeat. Not a beep, not a machine. My real heartbeat. Slow, heavy, rhythmic. It echoed in my ears like thunder beneath the ocean. Somehow I was still alive. Not floating in the atmosphere of Neptune, not lost in fractured timelines or buried in black glass temples beneath Triton. Was somewhere else. White light surrounded me, soft, endless, not warm, not cold. A space between things, between what had been and what would come next. I felt like I had been peeled away from reality and placed on a shelf made of silence. And then, voices. Not words, not sentences, memories. Dad, look. I built. It. Do you think they'll pick me? We shouldn't have gone this far. Hundreds, thousands, millions. I wasn't in a physical place anymore. I was in a cache, a vault of memories too chaotic, too tangled, too human for the gate to digest. My resistance, the signal I had sent, had worked better than anyone imagined. I had become a carrier of incompatibility, a node of noise, and so it had spat me out. The creature had retreated, but not defeated. It was still out there, beneath the fabric of stars, listening, learning, evolving, and Earth. Earth had been noticed. We thought we were alone in the universe, then we thought we weren't. Now we knew the truth, we were seen, but we were also understood. Not in the way we'd hoped, not as equals, not as explorers, as contamination. And so began what they now call the memory war. I wasn't the only one. Across the planet, others who'd heard the fragments of the signal, astronomers, deep-sea researchers, even random civilians who'd picked up the wrong frequency on a broken radio, began to feel it. The pulse, the pressure, the memory tremors. Earth had become interactive, dreams twisted into visions, time slipped, ghost signals spread through the internet, and beneath it all, the gate continued to throb in the dark beyond Neptune like a wound that never healed. Governments panicked, religions rewrote themselves overnight, SETI was dissolved and quietly rebuilt under 20 different codenames. But a group emerged, not a military, not a scientific faction, a resistance of memory engineers, poets, psychologists, musicians, children, the mad and the lucid. Their job wasn't to destroy the gate, it was to keep it from recognizing us again. They filled our digital space with chaos, created art so illogical, so emotionally volatile, that the creature couldn't pass it. They turned every television, every satellite, every broadcast into a shield of noise, not to hide, but to confuse. I became their first soldier, not because I was strong, not because I was smart, but because I had seen the thing with no eyes and said no, and it had blinked. So now I travel, not through space, but through minds. I'm a memory walker. I insert stories into people's dreams. I fill their thoughts with contradiction. I paint impossible images and hide them in background code, because as long as we remain irrational, we remain invisible. But we know the truth. The gate is still turning. The creature is still listening. And someday, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not for generations, It will try again and we'll be ready. Not with bombs, not with science, but with chaos, with grief, with love, with the terrible, beautiful burden of what it means to be human. We are the noise. We are the virus in the machine. We are Earth, and we remember, into whatever was listening beyond it.